In the overgrown garden of the Kingsley estate, an elderly woman sat trembling desperately, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her memory. Beside her, Lena, a maid's daughter, believed she was simply helping a lonely stranger. But the girl had no idea. The fragile woman she was guiding back from darkness was the wife of a billionaire who had been searching for her in desperation for 3 months. The Kingsley mansion loomed like a forgotten museum, its vast halls echoing with silence instead of life. Lena's heart pressed close to her mother as they walked through the servants' entrance that first morning of summer. Maria had warned her to stay quiet, stay invisible. But at 12 years old, Lena had never been good at either. While her mother disappeared into the east wing with cleaning supplies, Lena wandered toward the neglected garden out back. The hedges had grown wild roses, strangling themselves on rusted trellises. It felt like a place where time had simply stopped caring. That's when she saw her. An elderly woman sat perfectly still on a stone bench beneath a dying oak tree. Her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her clothes, through quality fabric, were wrinkled and stained with grass. But it was her eyes that made Lena freeze. They were open, staring at nothing, as if the woman was looking at a world only she could see. "Hello." Lena approached carefully, the way you might approach a wounded bird. The woman's head turned slowly. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face, then something softer. "Hello, child." Her voice cracked from disuse. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman looked down at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. I don't know. I don't know why I'm here." She touched her temple gently. "My name is Evelyn. At least, I think it is. But everything else is gone." Lena sat down beside her, ignoring the dampness of the stone. "What do you remember?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "Lavender. The smell of it. And a song. Someone used to sing to me." Her fingers trembled as she touched a silver ring on her left hand. "This ring means something. Someone gave it to me. But I can't see their face anymore." From inside the house, Lena could hear the distant sound of her mother calling for her. But something kept her rooted to that bench. This woman wasn't just lost in the garden. She was lost inside herself. "How did you get here?" Lena asked gently. "I walked. I think I walked for a very long time." Evelyn's voice wavered. "I was looking for something. A place that felt like home. And when I saw this garden through the gates..." She gestured weakly at the overgrown lavender bushes nearby. "I just knew I had to come in." The other staff had noticed Evelyn earlier that morning. They'd assumed she was a homeless woman who'd wandered onto the property. The groundskeeper wanted to call the police. But there was something about the way Evelyn moved through the garden, not like an intruder, but like someone retracing steps they'd taken 1,000 times before. Lena reached out and gently touched the older woman's hand. The contact seemed to jolt something deep inside Evelyn. Her breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears. "There was someone," Evelyn whispered, her whole body beginning to shake. "Someone used to hold my hand just like this. I can almost feel him. I can almost see his face, but..." A sob broke through. "Why can't I remember? Why can't I remember anything that matters?" Lena held on tighter. "It's okay. We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, sitting in a forgotten garden with a stranger whose memories had been stolen by something cruel and invisible, Lena made a silent promise. She would help this woman find her way back no matter what it took. But before we continue, remember to subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. This story is about to unfold into something nobody could have expected. Over the next few days, Lena began to notice patterns in the fog that surrounded Evelyn's mind. Every time the elderly woman came near the lavender bushes, her hands would tremble violently, not from fear, but from something deeper. Recognition without understanding. A memory trying desperately to break through. "This house," Evelyn whispered one afternoon, staring up at the mansion's weathered facade. "I think I've been here before. Not as a visitor. I lived here, didn't I?" Lena's heart quickened. "Do you remember anything specific?" Evelyn's brow furrowed with concentration. "There was music, piano music. Someone played for me in the evenings." Her voice grew distant. And laughter. This place used to be filled with laughter. While Maria worked upstairs, Lena took it upon herself to become Evelyn's guide through the landscape of her own lost past. She led the older woman slowly through the mansion, watching carefully for any spark of recognition. They walked down hallways lined with covered furniture through rooms that smelled of dust and abandonment. Lena encouraged Evelyn to touch things: the curved banister of the main staircase, the cold marble of the entrance hall, the brass doorknobs that had tarnished with age. Each contact was an experiment, a gentle knock on the door of memory. At the stone statue in the courtyard, Evelyn paused. Her fingers traced the carved features. "I used to sit here and read," she said suddenly. "In the summers, there was a fountain. It made such a peaceful sound." "The fountain's still there," Lena pointed. "It just doesn't work anymore." They continued to the gallery room where tall windows let in streams of dusty sunlight. Evelyn stood at the threshold, her breathing shallow. Then, without warning, she moved forward and pressed her palm against the glass display case in the center of the room. "Someone played piano here," she said, her voice barely audible. "Right here, for me. I can hear it in my mind, but I can't see who it was." Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, an old woman searching for a younger version of herself. "Why can't I see his face?" Maria found them there an hour later. She pulled Lena aside, her expression tight with worry. "We need to call the police. This woman could be dangerous. We don't know anything about her." "She's not dangerous, Mom. She's just lost." Lena looked back at Evelyn, who was now sitting on the floor, exhausted from the effort of remembering. "She belongs here. I know she does. That's not for us to decide." But Lena had already decided. Something about Evelyn's confusion felt tragic in a way that went beyond simple memory loss. There was a story here buried beneath layers of forgotten years, and Lena felt pulled toward it like gravity. That night, when the house had grown quiet and dark, Lena couldn't sleep. She crept downstairs for water and found Evelyn wandering the hallway like a ghost, her fingers trailing along the wallpaper. "Evelyn," Lena whispered. The older woman turned, relief flooding her features. "I didn't know where I was. I woke up and nothing looked familiar." They sat together on the bottom step of the grand staircase, moonlight filtering through the high windows above them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn reached over and gently touched Lena's hair. "I think I had a daughter once," she said softly. "Or maybe a granddaughter. Someone young like you." Her eyes glistened with tears she didn't fully understand. "She had kind eyes just like yours. I can feel the love I had for her, but I can't see her face. Isn't that strange, to remember the feeling, but not the person?" Lena took Evelyn's hand. "Maybe the feelings come back first, and then the rest will follow." Evelyn smiled sadly. "You're wise for someone so young. My mom says I think too much. Thinking isn't the problem, child. Remembering is." Evelyn looked around at the shadows of the grand house. "I'm afraid of what I might remember. What if the reason I forgot was because the truth was too painful to carry?" Lena squeezed her hand. "Then we'll carry it together." The discovery came by accident. Lena had been searching the old storage room for extra cleaning supplies when her foot caught on a loose floorboard. Beneath it, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was a wooden box filled with photographs. Most were formal portraits, stiff poses, unsmiling faces from decades past. But one photograph made Lena's breath catch. It showed a younger Evelyn, perhaps in her 40s, standing in the garden beside the lavender bushes. Her smile was radiant, genuine. But the photograph had been violently torn in half. Whoever had stood beside Evelyn in that moment had been ripped away, leaving only a masculine hand visible at the edge, reaching toward her. Lena brought the photograph to Evelyn that afternoon. The moment the older woman saw it, her entire body went rigid. The paper shook in her trembling hands. "That's me," she whispered. "I remember that day. I remember the sun on my face, the smell of lavender, the feeling of—" Her voice cracked. "Someone was standing next to me. Someone I loved more than anything in the world. But who tore this picture? Why would someone tear us apart?" Before Lena could respond, footsteps echoed behind them. Daniel Hale, the estate's long-serving butler, appeared in the doorway. His face drained of all color when he saw what Evelyn was holding. "Where did you get that?" His voice was sharp, almost panicked. "I found it in storage," Lena said. Daniel crossed the room in 3 quick strides and snatched the photograph from Evelyn's hands. "This shouldn't be here. This should have been destroyed years ago." He shoved it into his jacket pocket, his fingers trembling. "Why?" Lena demanded. "Who's in that picture with her?" "That's none of your concern, girl." But Daniel's eyes betrayed him. He looked at Evelyn with something between pity and fear. "And you," he said to the older woman, "you shouldn't be here at all. You should have stayed gone." The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn stepped backward, confusion and hurt warring on her face. "Gone? What do you mean?" Daniel's jaw clenched. He seemed to be fighting some internal battle. Finally, he lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "The master cannot see you here. Do you understand if he finds out you've returned?" He shook his head. "Just stay out of sight." He turned and walked away quickly, leaving both Lena and Evelyn standing in stunned silence. "He knows me," Evelyn said slowly. "That man knows who I am. And he's hiding something." Lena's mind was racing. This wasn't just about memory loss anymore. Evelyn hadn't simply wandered away from some care facility. She belonged to this house, and someone had wanted her gone. That evening, Lena couldn't shake the image of that torn photograph. She found Evelyn sitting in the garden again, staring at her hands. "Tell me what you remember about leaving," Lena said gently, sitting beside her. Evelyn closed her eyes, concentrating. "There was an accident. A car. I remember broken glass and pain." Her breathing quickened. "And then, hands pulling me. Someone was pulling me away. I was screaming because I didn't want to go, but everything was so confused. The pain, the fear." She pressed her palms against her temples. "And then nothing. Just walking. Walking for so long I forgot why I was walking. Until I saw the lavender and something inside me said, 'Home.'" "Someone took you away," Lena said, the pieces falling into place. "After the accident. Someone moved you somewhere else. But why, if this was my home, if I had someone who loved me?" Evelyn's voice broke. "Why would they let me disappear?" That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She heard voices downstairs, Daniel on the phone in the butler's pantry. She crept close enough to hear his urgent whisper through the door. "We can't keep this from the master much longer. She's here. Yes, here in the house. And she's starting to remember." A pause. "I know what you said. But this girl, this Maid's daughter, she's helping her piece things together. If Mrs. Kingsley remembers everything..." His voice dropped even lower. "Then we'll all have to answer for what we did." Lena's heart pounded. This wasn't just about a lost memory. This was about a buried truth that someone had worked very hard to keep hidden. The 3rd floor had always been off limits. Maria had mentioned it only once, saying that those rooms hadn't been opened in years, that they were part of the house the owner wanted left untouched. But after overhearing Daniel's phone call, Lena knew that somewhere in those sealed chambers lay the answers Evelyn desperately needed. She waited until late afternoon, when her mother was occupied in the East Wing and Daniel had left for his weekly trip into town. Then she found Evelyn in the garden and took her hand. "I think I know where your memories are," Lena said quietly. "But we have to be quick." They climbed the main staircase together, Evelyn moving slowly, leaning on the banister. With each step upward, the older woman's breathing grew more labored, not from exertion, but from something deeper. Recognition was pulling at her even before they reached the landing. The 3rd floor hallway was dark, the air thick with dust and the weight of years. 3 doors lined the corridor, all closed, but Evelyn moved toward the last one as if drawn by invisible threads. Her hand reached for the doorknob, then hesitated. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I'm right here with you," Lena promised. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in years. And the moment Evelyn stepped across the threshold, she collapsed to her knees. The room was frozen in time. A 4-poster bed with ivory linens. A vanity with silver-handled brushes still laid out as if waiting for their owner to return. Watercolor paintings of gardens on the walls. and on the nightstand a music box shaped like a carousel, its tiny horses suspended mid-gallop. Evelyn crawled forward, her whole body shaking. She reached the music box and turned the key with trembling fingers. The mechanism was stiff from years of silence, but slowly a melody began to play. A lullaby, gentle and heartbreaking. "He gave this to me," Evelyn gasped through tears. "On our anniversary. He said that our love was like a carousel, endless and beautiful." She pressed the box to her chest. "This was our room. This was where we slept together for 47 years. Lena felt tears burning her own eyes. She moved through the room, opening drawers carefully. Inside the wardrobe hung dresses from another era, still smelling faintly of lavender sachet. On the top shelf was a hat box, and inside it, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dried bouquet. "Lavender," Lena said softly, bringing it to Evelyn. The older woman buried her face in the brittle flowers. "From our wedding. He picked them himself because the florist said they were too common for a society wedding." A laugh broke through her tears. "But he didn't care what anyone thought. He knew they were my favorite." Evelyn stood on shaking legs and moved to the bed. She sat on the edge, her hands smoothing over the coverlet. "I used to wake up early just to watch him sleep. He'd reach for me even in his dreams." Fresh tears streamed down her face. "His name, it's right there just behind the fog. I can feel it on my tongue." Lena opened the drawer of the nightstand and found a velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the simple silver band Evelyn wore, but an engagement ring with a large diamond. Engraved inside the band were two initials, CK. "CK," Lena read aloud. Evelyn's eyes went wide. "Charles." The name came out like a prayer. "Charles Kingsley. My husband." She pressed both hands to her mouth. "Oh God, Charles. How could I have forgotten Charles?" The memories were flooding back now, too fast, too overwhelming. Evelyn began to rock back and forth, caught between joy at remembering and anguish at realizing what she'd lost. "We had 53 years together," she whispered. "We built this house. We planted that garden. Every lavender bush was for me." Her voice rose with panic. "Where is he? Why isn't he here? Did something happen to him? Is he—" "Breathe," Lena said, kneeling in front of her. "Just breathe. We'll find out." But Evelyn was spiraling now, decades of memories crashing into her consciousness all at once. The accident. We were driving to the city for dinner. The anniversary dinner. And then the lights, the impact. She grabbed Lena's shoulders. "I woke up in a hospital, but it wasn't our hospital. And there were people I didn't know, and they kept calling me by a different name, and I was so confused, so scared." "Someone moved you," Lena said. "After the accident. Someone took you somewhere else. But why would Charles let them unless—" Evelyn's face went ashen. "Unless he thinks I'm dead. Unless they told him I died in that accident." She struggled to stand. "I have to find him. I have to tell him I'm alive. Where is he?" Before Lena could answer, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with anger and something that looked like genuine fear. "What have you done?" he breathed. She wasn't supposed to remember. The doctors said she'd never remember. Evelyn turned to face him, and for the first time since Lena had met her, the older woman stood tall, the fog completely lifted from her eyes. "Where is my husband?" she demanded, her voice steady and strong. "Where is Charles?" Daniel never got the chance to answer. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the estate, followed by urgent voices. Heavy footsteps pounded through the entrance hall below, moving with the kind of desperate speed that only comes from months of searching, finally reaching an end. "Check every room," a man's voice commanded, raw with emotion. "She has to be here," Daniel said. Evelyn's hand flew to her chest. "That voice," she whispered. "I know that voice." Lena ran to the hallway and looked down over the banister. A small group of men in expensive suits were spreading through the first floor, but one man stood in the center of the entrance hall, looking up as if he could sense exactly where to find what he'd been looking for. Charles Kingsley was 82 years old, but grief had aged him beyond his years. His silver hair was unkempt, His suit rumpled as if he'd been wearing it for days. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were the eyes of a man who had been hollowed out by loss, who had spent 3 months living in a nightmare with no end. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, if you're here, please." At the sound of her name from his lips, Evelyn moved as if pulled by a force stronger than memory. She walked to the top of the staircase, Lena close behind her. For a moment she simply stood there looking down at the man who had been torn from her life. Charles looked up. The world seemed to stop. "Evelyn." He said her name like a question, like a prayer, like he was afraid that if he spoke too loudly she might vanish like smoke. "Is it really you?" But when Evelyn didn't respond, when she only stared at him with confused recognition, Charles's face crumpled. He took the stairs 2 at a time, moving with an urgency that belied his age. When he reached her, he stopped just inches away, his hands hovering near her face but not quite touching, as if she might shatter. "It's me," he said, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "It's Charles. I've been looking for you everywhere. 3 months, Evelyn. 3 months I thought you were gone forever." Evelyn stepped backward, overwhelmed. I know you. I remember your voice, but..." Her hand pressed against her temple. "There's so much fog still." The retreat felt like a knife to Charles's heart. He looked at Daniel, who had followed them into the hallway. "What did they do to her?" His voice turned sharp, dangerous. "You told me she was recovering in a private facility upstate. You said the doctors needed time, but she's here. She's been here." Daniel's face was ashen. "Sir, I can explain. Later." Charles turned back to Evelyn, and the hardness melted away instantly. "Please, my love. Don't you know me?" Lena stepped forward. "She's been remembering," she said quietly. "Little by little. She just needs time and the right triggers." Charles looked at the young girl properly for the first time. "Who are you?" "Lena Hart. My mom works here. I've been helping Mrs. Kingsley piece things together." Something in Charles's expression shifted, gratitude mixed with anguish. He looked back at his wife. "The lavender," he said suddenly. "You always loved lavender. Remember, I planted every bush in the garden for you. 1 for each year we were married." Evelyn's breath hitched. "The garden," she whispered. "You'd bring me fresh cuttings every Sunday morning." "Yes." Charles's face lit up with desperate hope. "And I'd play piano for you in the evenings. Chopin was your favorite. You'd sit in the gallery and read while I played." "The music box," Evelyn said, her voice strengthening. "You gave me a music box. With horses. For our 47th anniversary." Charles reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, her wedding band, the twin to the one still on her finger. He held it out to her. "You left this behind in the hospital. I've carried it every day, waiting for the moment I could give it back to you." Evelyn stared at the ring, and then at the man holding it. Her hand trembled as she reached out and took it. The moment the metal touched her skin, something inside her broke wide open. "Charles," she breathed, and this time the name carried 53 years of love. "Oh, Charles." They fell into each other's arms, 2 people who had been violently separated finding their way back together. They held each other and wept like children, their bodies shaking with the force of a reunion that both of them had thought impossible. Charles hired the best neurologists in the country. They arrived with their charts and scans, their technical explanations of post-traumatic amnesia and dissociative fugue states. Dr. Rowan, the most renowned among them, examined Evelyn thoroughly and delivered his verdict with clinical detachment. The trauma from the accident, combined with what appears to be extended psychological stress, created a perfect storm for memory loss. He explained to Charles, "Recovery is possible, but it will be slow. She may never remember everything." But the doctors didn't understand what Lena had already discovered. Evelyn didn't need medication or clinical therapy. She needed to be surrounded by the life she'd lived, touched by the things she'd loved, reminded gently of who she'd been before the world had stolen her away. Charles tried everything the doctors suggested. He showed Evelyn photographs, played her favorite music, told her stories of their decades together. But each session left her exhausted and frustrated, the memories remaining just out of reach, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. It was Evelyn herself who finally asked for Lena. "The girl," she said to Charles one evening. The maid's daughter. She helped me remember before. She knows how. Lena came the next morning, nervous but determined. Charles led her to the sunroom where Evelyn sat surrounded by photo albums she couldn't quite connect to. I don't know what you did, Charles said quietly. But my wife trusts you. Please help her come back to me completely. Lena sat beside Evelyn and took her hand. We're not going to force anything today, she said softly. We're just going to take a walk. Like we used to. She led Evelyn out to the garden to the lavender bushes where they'd first met. The afternoon sun was warm, and bees hummed lazily among the purple blooms. Lena picked a sprig and held it to Evelyn's nose. Tell me what you feel, she said. Not what you remember. What you feel. Evelyn closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. Safe, she whispered. I feel safe here. Good. Now tell me about the person who made you feel that way. Charles. The name came easier now. He'd work in the garden with me. Even when he became successful, even when everyone else hired people to do everything, he'd still get dirt under his fingernails planting flowers with me. A small smile touched her lips. He said it kept him grounded, reminded him what really mattered. Over the following days, Lena created a careful path through Evelyn's past. She didn't overwhelm her with entire decades at once. Instead, she focused on single moments, small details that could unlock larger memories. They baked bread together in the kitchen, and Evelyn's hands remembered the rhythm of kneading even when her mind couldn't recall the recipe. Charles loved fresh bread, she said suddenly. Every Sunday morning, with butter and honey. They sat in the gallery while Lena played simple melodies on the piano. Nothing complex, just the basic scales. But Evelyn's foot began to tap in time, and then she was humming, and then she was singing words to a song she didn't know she remembered. That was our song, she said, tears streaming down her face. Our first dance. Charles stepped on my feet 3 times because he was so nervous. Each recovered memory was like finding a piece of a vast puzzle. The accident began to make sense. Evelyn remembered the hospital, the confusion, the panic when she woke, and no one could tell her where Charles was. She remembered being transferred to another facility, people with kind faces who called her by the wrong name, who said her family had made arrangements for her care. They told me I had no one, Evelyn said, her voice shaking with anger and grief. They said I'd been alone when they found me. And I was so confused, so lost in my own head, I believed them. Someone didn't want you to come home, Lena said gently. Someone moved you after the accident. Evelyn looked toward the house, toward the window where Charles stood watching them with desperate hope. But why? Who would do that to us? I don't know, Lena admitted. But what matters now is that you're here, you're home, and you're remembering. That evening, Evelyn asked Charles to play piano for her. He sat at the grand piano in the gallery, his fingers finding the keys of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Evelyn closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, and suddenly she wasn't an old woman struggling to remember. She was 25 again, meeting Charles for the first time at a charity concert. She was 38, dancing with him in this very room. She was 50, 60, 70, every age they'd been together, every moment they'd shared. When the last note faded, Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at her husband with perfect clarity. I remember everything, she whispered. Charles, I remember all of it. He crossed the room and took her in his arms, and this time there was no confusion, no hesitation. Just 2 people who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. 3 weeks after Evelyn's memory had fully returned, Charles Kingsley invited Maria and Lena to the grand sitting room. It was the first time either of them had been asked to enter the formal spaces of the house as guests rather than staff. Maria smoothed her dress nervously, but Lena walked with quiet confidence, her hand in Evelyn's. Charles stood by the fireplace looking stronger than he had in months. The hollow grief had left his eyes, replaced by something Lena recognized as purpose. Evelyn sat in her favorite chair, the one by the window where afternoon light pooled like honey. Please sit. Charles gestured to the sofa. When they were settled, he cleared his throat and Lena could see his hands trembling slightly. I've spent the last 3 months in a nightmare. I hired investigators, contacted hospitals across 3 states, offered rewards. I did everything money could buy. His voice cracked. But money couldn't bring her back. Money couldn't give me the one thing I needed most. He looked at Lena, and the gratitude in his eyes was almost overwhelming. A 12-year-old girl did what an army of professionals couldn't. You saw my wife not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who needed to be heard. You gave her patience when she needed understanding and love when she needed hope. I just wanted to help, Lena said quietly. And you did more than that. Charles walked to his desk and retrieved an envelope. Maria, I know you've worked hard to provide for your daughter. I know what it's like to struggle to worry about the future. That ends today. Maria's eyes widened as he handed her the envelope. Sir, I don't understand. Inside, you'll find the deed to the cottage on the east side of the property. It's yours free and clear. You'll never have to worry about rent or housing again. And your position here is permanent with a salary that reflects the dignity of your work. Maria's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Mr. Kingsley, I can't possibly. You can and you will. His voice was firm but kind. Your daughter gave me back my life. This is the least I can do. He turned to Lena. And you, young lady. Evelyn and I have discussed this at length. We'd like to establish an educational trust in your name. Full scholarship to any school you choose, undergraduate and graduate programs, all expenses covered. You have a gift for seeing people truly seeing them. That kind of empathy combined with education could change the world. Lena felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at Evelyn, who was smiling with the warmth of a grandmother who'd found a kindred spirit. You gave me back more than my memory, sweetheart, Evelyn said softly. You gave me back my life, my husband, my home. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else, including myself. That kind of gift deserves to be nurtured. I don't know what to say, Lena whispered. Say you'll accept, Charles replied. Say you'll let us be part of your journey the way you were part of ours. Lena nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Maria pulled her close, both of them overwhelmed by a generosity that transcended simple gratitude. Later that afternoon, the four of them stood together in the garden among the lavender bushes, the same spot where Lena had first found Evelyn sitting lost and alone. But now the garden didn't feel abandoned. It felt alive again, full of possibility and second chances. Evelyn took Lena's hand and squeezed it gently. You brought me out of the darkness when I couldn't find my own way. You were the light I'd forgotten to look for. Lena looked up at the elderly woman whose memories she'd helped rescue from oblivion. I think we found each other, she said simply. Right when we both needed it most. Charles wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, and Maria stood beside her daughter, and for a moment, they were simply two families brought together by compassion, bound by gratitude, standing in a garden where hope had taken root and bloomed. The story comes to an end here. Thank you for spending your precious time listening. Although this is a fictional tale created to evoke emotion and inspiration, I hope it brought something meaningful to you. If you'd like to continue exploring stories like this, please check out the other videos right here on the Maid's Daughter Stories channel, and don't forget to subscribe. Your presence truly means a lot to us. See you in the next video.